Hey everybody, it is Nathan Selove with another episode of Autism Actually Speaking. So this is a topic that I hoped I'd never have to cover again, but here we are. Let's talk about anti-vaxxers. Again. Recently, another study came out showing that vaccines, in fact, do not cause autism, and my first thought when I saw this was, why are we still expanding resources on this thoroughly debunked falsehood? But there's a good reason, because there was recently a breakout of measles, like 50 cases of it in the state of Washington due to anti-vaxxers, and also Oregon saw its first case of tetanus in 30 years due to anti-vaxxers. And before I start this, I would just like to go ahead and put one small caveat, which is that I understand that some people don't have access to vaccinations due to socioeconomic means. And my position on that is that vaccines should be provided as a public good, but if that is why you are unable to vaccinate your children, then this video is not necessarily targeting you. So today I'm going to talk about why people think vaccines cause autism, why vaccinating your children is so important, and how the anti-vaxxer movement has led to the further demonization and stigmatization of autistic people. First off, the idea that vaccines cause autism originally comes from a man named Andrew Wakefield, a British scientist who carried out a study that first tried to find a link between vaccines and autism. Now, this study was initially published, and when it started getting more media attention, people started looking more and more into its methodology, and they found many flaws. Not only that, but they also looked at the procedures of which his study was carried out and found ethics code violations. Furthermore, they also discovered where he got his funding. It was through pharmaceutical companies that had a vested interest in making people afraid of vaccinations. Because vaccines prevent diseases from happening, while pharmaceuticals treat diseases. It is more profitable to sell treatments for a disease after it has already happened than to prevent it from happening in the first place. After this was discovered, Andrew Wakefield was disgraced by basically the entire scientific community. The journal that he published his work in withdrew his publication, his credentials were basically taken away, and hundreds of studies have tried to replicate the findings of his experiment, and none of them have been successful. Another reason why some people think that vaccines cause autism is due to anecdotal stories that conflate causation with correlation. So there are some stories floating around the internet of parents that started noticing symptoms of autism in their children around the same time that their children started getting vaccines. Now, the reason for this is because a lot of the symptoms that become diagnosable in autistic children start to show themselves at around the same time that the first round of vaccines start getting put into children. So that's why people believe vaccines cause autism. Now let's talk a little bit about why vaccinating your children is so important. Now, the obvious answer is to protect your children from potentially life-threatening or life-altering diseases. However, the importance of vaccination goes beyond that. A lot of anti-vaxxers make the argument that this is my kid, therefore it is my choice, and it only affects my kid, it does not affect anyone else. Now, we can have an argument about whether or not that constitutes parental negligence, but that's a conversation for another day. For now, I just want to focus on the argument that it only affects my child. So that's not entirely true. Not vaccinating your child can reduce herd immunity. Now, there are some people that, due to, say, allergies or autoimmune conditions, are not able to get vaccinated. It is more of a danger to vaccinate them than it is not to vaccinate them. Because of this, people cannot rely on vaccines to keep them safe from a disease. So instead, they rely on herd immunity. Now, herd immunity is basically relying on the idea that other people in the community that can be vaccinated are vaccinated. Therefore, they're not carrying the disease. The more people that can be vaccinated who are vaccinated, the stronger the herd immunity. And thus, the safer the people that cannot be vaccinated are from those diseases. Another way that not vaccinating your kids can actually affect everyone else is through mutations. So vaccines basically teach our body what a disease strand looks like, and it uses that information in order to combat it in the future. The more people that are infected with a virus, the more likely that that virus is to start to develop mutations. Mutations that can potentially make a specific vaccine less effective against that disease in the future. So the decision not to vaccinate yourself or your children does not just harm yourself and your children, it harms the community as a whole. So now let's talk about the sociological consequences of anti-vaxxers. When a parent makes the decision not to vaccinate their child because they believe that there's a slight chance that that child might develop autism, the implication of that cost-benefit analysis is basically that autism is scarier than a potentially deadly disease. Now, I understand that I don't necessarily speak for all autistics, and my experience with autism is not necessarily representative of all autistics. There are challenges that I have that other autistics don't have, and there are challenges that other autistics have that I don't have. You met one autistic, our experiences are vastly different. However, might I offer my own story as a small anecdote for why autism is not necessarily a horrible thing that you should treat as worse than a deadly disease. Now, I have had challenges throughout my life. I've been bullied, I've had problems with going out in public due to sensory, but I've also had a lot of good things in my life. And a lot of those good things have been a result of autism. The hyperfocus that autism gives me, I believe, was very helpful throughout my schooling career. I graduated with a bachelor's degree. I am currently finishing up my master's degree. I am working in a job that I absolutely love. I live in a house that I own. I'm married to someone who I love with all my heart. And I've had a pretty good life. And autism has not taken that away from me. Autism, in a lot of ways, has added to that. I love who I am, and I would never change who I am. Who I am is not the result of a vaccine. Who I am is the result of genetics. But even if my autism was a result of a vaccination, I would never have done anything differently. Because the diseases that vaccines prevent against are way worse than anything autism could ever throw at you. Oregon saw its first case of tetanus in 30 years. Tetanus is one of the most horrific, agonizing diseases in the history of humankind. And you know what? I'll take being the way I am over that any day. Well, that's today's video. Thank you all for watching. I know that I got a little bit political and controversial today, and I understand that for a lot of you, that's probably not really your thing. But if it is your thing, you should know that I actually have a second YouTube channel called Factually Biased. I do political analysis every week. I give my opinions on things, and if that's something you're interested in, I will leave a link in the description and also as one of the end cards on this video. So if that's not your thing, then you do you. But if it is, check it out and maybe subscribe. In the meantime, if you have any questions or topics you'd like addressed, please leave them in the comments below, or message me on my Facebook, also linked below. And remember, if you got vaccinated, you may or may not be autistic. And your vaccination status has no effect on that.